All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are live in the 702. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening today. Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is where you can like and follow me on all social media platforms. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channels of the Spotlight Sports Network here, your home of the Snake Sports Talk Show, and subscribe to the Snake Sports Talk Show as well, and follow me on Spotify. Listen, I've got such a packed show, and I just want to let everybody know that this is only going to be cut down to an hour today. Lots and lots of stuff planned out. But I hope all of you are safe and well. We know that we have had an awful lot of stuff just happening all around in the world, and it's one that I think is words can't really explain it, and it's a little bit unfathomable. But eventually we will come to terms, and eventually there will be a process set in place, and it's only just a matter of time. It's only just a matter of time when I look at it. But as long as we as a nation are continuing to open our doors and continuing to bring some normalcy, hopefully we will see the light at the end of the tunnel when this is all over. So let me just shift to this real quick. So the NFL has absolutely been the league who has taken a step forward, they've built up their plans big time all throughout the pandemic. They've had the free agency. We had the draft. We have the schedules now leaked, and we're almost ready for the season to start. One of the things I wanted to talk a little bit more about are the rookie quarterbacks who are coming into this league. Now, the rookie quarterbacks who have been drafted are Joe Burrow, Tua, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, Jacob Eason, and, of course, Jalen Hurts. There have been lots of rookie quarterbacks who have been drafted this year, and I think are going to be very, very interesting. But the one thing that I wanted to break down is this, because a lot of you, I'm sure, and maybe some of you, are fantasy football. You guys are fantasy football guys. You love playing it. I'm also a fantasy football guy myself. I've played on a league for, going on to about 4, close to 5 years with really, really good friends of mine, and it's always so much fun. So there is a lot of things that I look at when it comes to fantasy football, and even when it comes to rookie quarterbacks, because I do believe that Joe Burrow, we know, is going to be the starter for Cincinnati. That's not changing it. One of my other details on that is there's a lot on the line. It's not a pressure situation for a guy like Joe Burrow, but here's where it gets pressurous. Number one, you are playing in your home state of Ohio. Number two, you are also playing for an owner that we have no idea what the plan is for Cincinnati. And finally, you have all these other draft picks, whether it's the offensive line, the offensive weaponries, and the wide receivers and the running backs. And we're just trying to see exactly how the defense is going to shape, because the NFC North is tough with Baltimore, you're facing twice a year, Cleveland, who's getting stronger, and you've got Pittsburgh, only just from the defensive side. So Joe Burrow, as I mentioned, is going to have a little bit of a rocky career. And the only reason of that is, I'm not saying he won't be successful. I'd hope he will be, because you can't come off of a year in college where you had one of the greatest college football seasons in history. I do believe that Joe Burrow will be successful in Cincinnati in some ways, but it's going to be a little harder than for some organizations. Because in some organizations, like, think about it this way. Kansas City paved the way for Patrick Mahomes to come in, and he's lights out. He's the most unbelievable quarterback. Baltimore paved the way for a guy like Lamar Jackson, who is flashy, he's fast, and we have yet to see how he'll perform in the playoffs sooner than later. And then you have a bunch of other quarterbacks, Daniel Jones, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, and Deshaun Watson. All these quarterbacks have been paved the way for them to learning the playbook, taking reps with the first team, and then being prepared for when they step into the role as quote-unquote franchise quarterback. So I look at Joe Burrow, and I do believe he is a franchise quarterback, and I think he's probably one of the best prospects coming out of college. And I think personally a much better prospect than I think when Baker Mayfield first arrived in Cleveland. But all of that, opinions aside, that's just kind of my thought with that. But I think Joe Burrow will be successful in Cincinnati, but it'll be a lot harder than expected. Tua, on the other hand, because Miami shapes their offensive line, trying to protect Tua and protecting him of his hip injury that he suffered in college, and a lot of speculations around him because of the fact of, can Tua stay healthy? Can Tua be productive? I say yes to both those opinions, because I do believe that in Tua and his type of play style and his type of his skills, he's a guy that's accurate of the football for a left-hander. You've never really see too many left-handers in this league who's accurate as much as Tua is. I'll be honest. But the other thing of it is, too, is he's a little bit more elusive. He's a little more athletic, and I think can create spacing when the time in the pocket collapses. I think Tua can do that. But here's the other thing. Miami, everybody thought Miami was going to tank. Clearly, it was not quote-unquote tanking. They just kind of sat themselves in the right place because the defense got stronger since the trading of Minkah Fitzpatrick. By the way, Miami won the last of its games last year, and everybody turned their heads and thought Miami was not going to be as good of a rebuilding team as they thought they would. But Brian Flores is a smart, defensive-minded coach that knows how to shape this defense. And now adding Byron Jones and adding in Kyle Van Noy, he can very much shape this defense to where they can be productive. Because think about it. You're going into a year, no Tom Brady in the AFC East. You've got Buffalo, who's shaping their defense right, and they've got their offenses now with the upgrade of Stephon Diggs. And then you've got the Jets, where they finally have protection for a guy like Sam Darnold, where he's not running for his life anymore, and he's got Denzel Mims, finally a secondary receiver that Sam Darnold can throw to without having to rely on his number one all the time. So those are just the things with Tua and with the Dolphins, and I think that that's where their future shapes up. Justin Herbert, I think he's going to have a fabulous career. I truly think he's going to have a fabulous career. Because the thing of it is, the Chargers are moving into a new stadium. They've got brand new uniforms, and you've got brand new key players. So the defense has stacked itself up. And also, they finally fixed the offensive line, which has been a problem for years. And I'm not saying it's wasted away talent, but it has forced guys like Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers to move on. This time now, the Chargers are shaping themselves to where they have a healthy offensive line and they have a second chance at keeping a franchise quarterback in Justin Herbert. Listen, Tyrod Taylor, I like him. I think he is productive in some ways, but the future is not shaped for Tyrod Taylor. I'm sorry, but it is not shaped for a guy like Tyrod Taylor. All of this, the offensive weapons, the defensive core, the secondaries, it's shaped for a guy like Justin Herbert. Very much so. And which is why when I look at all these rookie quarterbacks, the only ones that I know maybe taking a seat are Jordan Love and Jacob Eason. Those are the only two quarterbacks. Why? Because Phillip Rivers finally has an offensive line that protects him because he's a pocket quarterback. And then you have Aaron Rodgers, the golden arm, and which is one of the reasons why Jordan Love will take the time needed to learn the playbook, understand it, and then be prepared for whatever happens with Aaron Rodgers. He's ready to go. Because the thing of it is, and I explained this, Aaron Rodgers is protecting his legacy. That's why he led the league in throwaways twice. Because he won't take risks. He's not a gunslinging, risky quarterback, much like Brett Favre was. That's why the Packers drafted Jordan Love in the first place. Because Jordan Love, like Aaron, raw talent, has an arm. It's something that's a little bit, I'm not saying it's a reflection or a mirroring effect, that almost looks similar to what Patrick Mahomes does. And Patrick Mahomes is not afraid to sling it, but he's very smart at where he places the football. Much like that I think Jordan Love will learn to do. But then you have Jalen Hurts for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I do believe, I've said this. I talked to a friend of mine last night, and we were talking a little bit more about the NFL, and we were talking about Philadelphia because that's his diehard team. And I explained that to him. I said, when you get into an accident, what's the best insurance policy that you weigh out on the table that gives you coverage, guarantees, rentals, and accident forgivenesses? And not to mention the best deductibles. Jalen Hurts, to me, is the best insurance policy that could ever happen to a guy like Carson Wentz. Everybody keeps thinking, oh, Jalen Hurts is coming in. You still have Carson Wentz. What's the deal? The fact of the matter is because Philadelphia knows, after learning from last year when they were on their last limb, losing all their wide receivers, losing all their offensive linemen, losing a lot of their defensive players, like injuries were, they were plagued with injuries everywhere. And then it got to the point where Carson Wentz got hurt again. And that was in the playoffs. Are you telling me that you're ready to put the football in a quarterback like Nate Sudfeld's hands? And I don't know too much about Nate Sudfeld, but I could tell you this, that I think that Jalen Hurts is probably one of the best options that Philadelphia has drafted. Because we don't know if Carson Wentz can remain healthy. I've said this, when Carson's healthy, he's a hell of a franchise quarterback. He's a guy that's elusive, runs out of the pocket, creates spaces, and he's got a hell of an arm. He's not afraid to sling it. But as long as the offensive line protects their quarterback, then the longevity sticks around. But I do believe that Jalen Hurts is probably one of the best insurance policies you can ask for. Because at least you deal with the deductible, you deal with the payment of a rental vehicle. That's the way that I look at it. When Carson Wentz is like, it's like, you know, your personal car. Like with me, for example, I was in an accident with a Toyota Tacoma. My Tacoma got wrecked. But after everything was weighed out and everything was, everything was all taken care of, I got my rental and it worked the same. Got me from point A to point B. That's what I think Jalen Hurts is there to do. He's that insurance policy. So when your vehicle gets wrecked and you go and get a rental or you go and get something different, that rental is going to perform the same way. Get you from point A to point B. But I think that all these rookie quarterbacks, they all have something very, very interesting to showcase. And I think they have, they've got something very, very, like, it's unique. All these quarterbacks are very, very unique. And I think each of them, this is what I looked at throughout the whole draft. I think each of them that have fit in these systems, I think they're going to turn out very, very well. I think they're going to turn out very well. Jacob Eason, I know, taking a back seat, but you have to think about it. You got Phillip Rivers. You also have Frank Reich, a former quarterback and an offensive-minded coach. He's going to be successful. And that was the one worry I had about Jacob Eason, is if he was going to end up going to a system that he can't adjust his skills. But I think now in Indianapolis, he will. And it's the same with Jordan Love. I think with Matt LaFleur, he'll adjust his skills, make him a very productive quarterback. And I think after Aaron Rodgers is done, Jordan Love's probably going to be the biggest thing that's ever happened to Green Bay, but only time will tell. Let me shift to this. So I've been seeing everywhere, and it's gotten me close to a point. And look, I am not a social media freak. Okay, I don't usually pay too much attention to what social media has to offer and what they have to say, because there have been so much that has been happening in the world lately that I think it's unimaginable, and it's really, really hard to explain it. Because the fact of the matter is, and I've spoke to a lot of people of this, and I don't throw my opinion out there so much, only because I'm professional. I'm in a live stream network full of great colleagues and great people that I love working with all the time. But in a time of it's not so much confusion. It's a time of where there are a lot of things that are corrupted. There are times where it's unimaginable, it's unexplainable, and people are looking for peace. People are looking for peace. People are looking for some type of fairness, an even-keeled, leveled playing field. And I've been seeing this all throughout social media. And why is it hitting the sports realm? Because there are a lot of athletes who have been taking a stand. For example, yesterday, Jaylen Brown of the Boston Celtics was out there in the march for justice for George Floyd. And it's a big deal because of the fact of that it's an athlete, a star athlete for the Boston Celtics, taking a stand and walking and marching. Peaceful protest. There have been lots of players who have voiced out their opinions from via Twitter, via Instagram, via Facebook, all over social media. All of them have voiced out their opinions. One that I think what was really interesting was what Adam Phelan had to say. And Adam Phelan, and here's the thing. I love Adam Phelan. He's probably one of the greatest stories I've seen coming into the NFL as a guy who was an undrafted free agent, goes in and he's part of the practice squad, and then all of a sudden, he's one of the number one receivers for the Minnesota Vikings. After all hard work pays off, he gets the money that he's earned, he's strived so hard for, and he's the number one wide receiver. But this is what Adam Phelan had to say, and I quote, "Wow. I honestly have no words and really don't know what to say, but there are a few things I do know. My family and I love this city, community, state, and this country, and I want to see real change, love and fairness for all people, no matter who you are or what you look like. I believe in the power of prayer. And I am praying for change, real change, that this society loves all and treats others as they want to be treated. This is a time more than ever that God wants us to come together as a country, as a world to defeat evil. As a few of my teammates have already stated, we know we have a platform that we can use to bring communities together. And we are going to do our best to do our part to create change that helps everyone be treated the same. God bless and stay safe." And again, this is a Minnesota Viking wide receiver. And he's fair, has nothing against anybody. But honestly, I think that caught my attention. That this is the medicine and that is the juice we need as a nation. The fact of the matter is, and I've weighed in my opinion yesterday and even a couple days prior, that yes, justice needs to be served, but The fact of the matter is, when you see all of this utter chaos with riots, looting, all sorts of it, where does the peace come from in that? And listen, I am not speaking against all of this or any of this. I'm very fair. I am not one-sided. I'm very fair. I even the playing field. And I'm very open for everybody because we all have opinions about something. If something didn't grab our attentions and we had nothing to say about it, then what's the point of me doing a show like this? Because anytime I get something that's in sports, I talk about it. And I talk about it with you every weekend, and I enjoy doing that. I absolutely enjoy doing that. But the point that I'm trying to make is that because systems and so many things in this generation and maybe more that has happened over the years have felt and seemed so corrupted, of course there needs to be a change. Of course there needs to be some sort of positivity or peace that comes out of it. And I am a firm believer that there will be. I am a firm believer that there will be. The one word that people have a problem with, even when we were in this pandemic for 2 months, is patience. There are a lot of impatient people who we know that have waited for change. Nothing has happened. We've had people who have waited for the doors to open the floodgates so that way then we can get back into normalcy. But with the way everything has been shaping in the last couple of days, trust me, it's scary and it's concerning because I look at what's happening here in Vegas, and the part of me that says this is like, look, we dealt with October 1st. And we know that was a harsh time. We knew it was. But everybody unified, came together, and helped everyone. Now, we know that this is not a similar scenario, and we know it's not an easy turn of events. It's not. But I do believe that there needs to be a change in place. That's why I think when I look at all of these athletes who are speaking out, I usually look at the ones who I think are much like myself. We think outside the box because of everything that we see. And it brings me to some sort of conclusion after everything is kind of digested and is evaluated. It then allows me to then speak with clear conscience. And so I do believe that right now, as a nation, we do seem more divided than not. And I've said this, you don't physically have to build walls to see how divided our nation really is. It's all around us, mentally and emotionally. We've all put our walls up, but we have no idea how to break those walls to come together and unify. That's why I believe that there will be a change in place, and hopefully that we will come to some sort of peace agreement sooner than later. Coming up next, I'm going to be talking a little bit more up on the NBA because I know that we have the playoffs coming up. And then finally, as my best for last, I will be talking about the NHL because I did break down the teams in the Western Conference who I think are going to be representing from the qualifying round to the Stanley Cup final. I've gave my prediction out on the West. Now I'm going to be focusing in on the East. You do not want to miss that on the Snake Sports Talk Show. So if you're just tuning in here to the Snake Sports Talk Show, welcome. I appreciate all of you guys jumping in here on the show. We talked a lot about just, rookie quarterbacks coming into the NFL. I just look at all of these quarterbacks and all these players who have who they've been drafted, and I made my points earlier about some of these steals of the draft. I mean, I look at Michael Pittman Jr. in Indianapolis. I look at I'm hoping that a guy like DeAndre Swift will have a good career in Detroit. I know it may be a little bit shaky, but I think he'll have a nice career there. And then there were a couple of other really good defensive players that are out there that I think are going to make an impact on all these defenses. So there is a lot of evaluation that goes on with some of these players. But I think this year, outside of some of the teams that we know are in complete rebuild mode, and I think some that are still struggling to find their niche to be a well-ran franchise, but there's no excuses. There's no excuses for either of them. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. It's a little bit more balanced than not. So I think we're going to have a fun season when the NFL comes right back. I think that this NFL season is going to be one that is going to be fun to watch. Lots and lots of big time headliners, and I think I think this will be a memorable year for the NFL. With the fact that not only here's the thing, we're not even talking about this damn virus or any of that, but we're talking more about all these players coming in and the impacts they'll have in these franchises. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So look, I said this yesterday about the NBA with the fact that they have been proposing a 16 and now to a 22 team playoff bracket, which I think is very, very interesting. I think part of that is because, one, they're trying to get Zion into the playoffs. The other part of it is that we're trying to see exactly how everything is going to shape up. I still believe that if you're doing a 22 team, that it should be splitted between 11 and 11 from West and East. Because if you try to put this whole thing together, and it's interesting because I was asked this question, who would want to see the Lakers and the Clippers in a final? That usually never happens because there's always one team that represents in the West and there's always a team that represents in the East. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how this works out. But I do believe that NBA has taken that step forward as being the league, and the commissioner, Adam Silver, being the leader there and the voice of trying to come up with a plan that will bring basketball back, because we know that there are going to be a lot of tests involved just to assure the players' protections. And then you also have the coaching staff, the medical staff, everybody that's involved. No fans in the stands, which is fine. But you got to get these games rolling. You got to get these games going. But I think it'll be interesting. I think personally, there's going to be some interesting stuff in the NBA. But I think it's going to be one that's going to be fun. Because, look, we lucked out when it came to March Madness. No March Madness this year. But if we are lucky enough to have the NBA playoffs, then we have something more to talk about. If we haven't already, with the doors finally opening and phases coming into effect, and there are different rules and regulations that are happening, and look, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I don't need to be in the arenas. I don't need to be in the stadiums. I don't need to be in the ballparks. But if we got something new and recent, then at least we'll have something more to talk about. But at the same time, we have something new to watch. Baseball, I know, is taking a toll. The NFL has already leaked out their schedules, and they've already got it figured out. The NHL has a 24-team playoff bracket, which I will then cover on the remaining 12 in the Eastern Conference. And the NBA, now they're proposing a 22-team playoff. Only Major League Baseball is lacking that right now. But the NBA, if they get this thing going, and I think if they do this, the smart way, it's not necessarily whether it's a right or wrong, but I think if they do this in the smart way, then maybe we'll have a lot more viewers and fans out there, regardless if they're not at the arenas, but at least are tuning into the televisions because the playoffs are on. I think it'll be great, and I think this is something much, much needed in sports. So hopefully we can get that underway. Time now for the hot press. So as I'm going to be talking about the NHL and the brackets, covering about the Eastern Conference, there was an article that was written here on ESPN that NHL plans to test players daily if games resume. I do believe that that is a smart thing that the NHL is doing. And they said, quote unquote, we will have a rigorous daily testing protocol where players are tested every evening, and those results are obtained before they would leave their hotel rooms the next morning. So we'll know if we have a positive test and whether the player has to self-quarantine himself as a result of that positive test. It's expensive, but we think it's really a foundational element of what we're trying to accomplish. So that was Deputy Commissioner Bill Daley that was speaking out about it, and I'm all for it. I'm all for it. If you have to constantly test just to assure the player's safety and their protection, then by all means, do so. Do so. I truly think that because we need something in sports to come out, because golf, NASCAR has done their part. The NFL has leaked the schedule. Major League Baseball, I don't know what the hell they're doing. But yet NBA and NHL, they've already got their plans set. And all we're waiting on is just waiting on the dates. And we are waiting for games to resume. So Barcelona's Lionel Messi, he ended up weighing in on the coronavirus and saying that football will, the life will never be the same again since the coronavirus had happened. And I agree. And this is a pandemic which has taken almost 400,000 lives across the nation, across the world. And soccer has been such a huge, impactful sport internationally. And the only reason of that is because, look, we watch the World Cup. We watch the World Cup every year, and a lot is on the line. A lot is on the line for some of these players and for these coaches and for the nation as a whole. I mean, you look at how this is where I've said this before about soccer is how will soccer adjust to this whole pandemic when it's all said and done? Because in international countries, soccer is the biggest sport out there. So, and you see fans with jerseys, flags, and they're raising their spirits, and they cheer on their team because they represent their country. And I think that that's huge. I think that's huge. It's impactful, and I'm not sure how they're going to end up adjusting this very, very well, but it is something that I think is worth taking a look at and hoping that once the pandemic is over, we have at least some sort of understanding. And I think we're a little bit assertive of many things. And Lionel Messi, and like him and Cristiano Ronaldo, who are one of the biggest names in soccer and biggest names internationally, this is a big deal. This is a big deal for these guys. And yeah, he's right. Soccer in life will never be the same after the pandemic happens, but you'll have a better understanding, and you'll also be very, very cordial to one another, and you'll respect everybody's social distancing, their spacing, and trying to stay healthy and stay safe throughout this whole entire time. So it's going to be interesting to see, and hopefully, you know, we'll have some sort of normalcy and understanding when this is all said and done. All right, so that was your hot press. So coming up next, I will be having my best for last in the NHL, and I am going to be breaking down the Eastern Conference. Since I broke down the West, and I've said it that I believe the Vegas Golden Knights will represent the Western Conference in the Stanley Cup Final. If we do have hockey back soon, but wait till you hear what I have in the Eastern Conference, and I think it's going to end up shocking you all. You don't want to end up missing that. Coming up on the Snake Sports Talk Show. All right, you guys. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank every single one of you who have been tuning into the show all weekend long. It's been so much fun, and I know it's been a little bit heavy for some, but still here, still right behind the mic, and willing to be talking about sports every weekend. And I'm so glad to have all of you here. I hope you all are having a great Sunday and had a great weekend and getting ready for the week ahead. So I'm going to be now doing my best for last here on the show. And I know we cut everything to about an hour, but there's a reason behind that. And I do appreciate all of your guys's your cooperations and, of course, your your supports through this. So in the Western Conference, I mentioned about it that the Vegas Golden Knights would end up representing in the Stanley Cup final. I do believe that may potentially happen. So now I'm going to focus a little more on the qualifying rounds for the Eastern Conference. So the Eastern Conference, these are the teams involved. So in the top 4 seeds, you have the Boston Bruins, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Washington Capitals, and the Philadelphia Flyers. And in the qualifying rounds who are going to be playing to play those top seeded teams, you got Pittsburgh Penguins, Montreal Canadiens, the Carolina Hurricanes, New York Rangers, New York Islanders, Florida Panthers, Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. So this is going to be interesting to watch because I've said this. I think the Eastern Conference, because they're filled with so many potential superstars, and the East is no joke. The East itself is very competitive, and they still do have some really good veterans involved in the Eastern Conference, and I think that they can weigh in a lot in this Stanley Cup playoffs when we do have the playoffs coming in. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's break down the Eastern Conference and see who will represent in the East. And I will not give my prediction. I will not give my prediction of the 2 teams that will be remaining in the Stanley Cup final and who's going to end up winning that. I'm going to save that for later. So let's go ahead and start. So the Pittsburgh Penguins are taking on the Montreal Canadiens. So number 1, the Pittsburgh Penguins, they've really adjusted well. Now, number 1, there were a lot of struggles that were happening with Matt Murray at goaltender, but they found the solution when they brought up Tristan Jarry, who when I watched this kid and I watched him play, he's very solid. And we've seen a lot of these young goaltenders who have come up, Carter Hart, Jordan Binnington, Elvis Merzlikins. It's interesting. And they are very, very impactful. So Tristan Jarry now has helped out Pittsburgh's goaltending situation, and their offense now has gotten better. They fixed the problem when they lost Phil Kessel. They got Jason Zucker. In Montreal's side of things, they've been kind of struggling up to in the middle of the season, and things were not looking right for them. Defense was not solid. Offense was kind of here and there, even though that they do have some real good players like Max Domi and many others. But I right now do not see Montreal kind of making it through as far. But I do believe that Pittsburgh, because of how competitive that they have been over the years, and now having Tristan Jarry behind the net, a solid young goaltender, I think this helps. And the fact that they have Matt Murray also as a backup in case of anything happens with Jarry. So I do believe Pittsburgh will beat Montreal and move on to the next round. The next game is the Carolina Hurricanes against the New York Rangers. Now, 2 things. Number 1, for Carolina, they've had injuries regarding their goaltenders. Now, I will say that the goaltenders now are healthy because they've had more than enough time to reevaluate, and they've had enough time to heal themselves up. So Peter Mrazek may be returning as well, and then you also will have James Reimer backing him up. But Carolina had upgraded a lot of their defenses because they ended up going and getting a guy like Brady Shea, who was with New York and is now facing off against New York in the playoffs. And then you had Sami Vatanen. He was personally a really good pick to me in the trade deadline because of the fact of he's a puck-moving defender, and he's a guy that's going to be willing to open up and create space for the offense to score. Now, New York has been quite the surprise because not only did they sign contracts for guys like Jacob Trouba and Artemi Panarin, but Artemi Panarin has been on fire with New York and getting them closer to the playoffs. Now they're in. And Mika Zibanejad's been having a hell of a year, 41 goals. And the Rangers are a very interesting team. Now, do I think they may get themselves into a position where they may move forward into the playoffs? It could be. I mean, they still are holding on to Henrik Lundqvist, who is a veteran goaltender and he's been there. He's been there. So I do believe that experience means everything. So I think this will be an upset. I think it's going to go all the way to 5 because this is going to be best of 5. I think it's going to go all the way to 5, and the New York Rangers are going to upset the Carolina Hurricanes. I know it is a bold statement of me to say that, but I just look at everything that's been happening with Carolina. Yes, they've had their defenses, but there has been a little of some issues when it came to the scoring opportunities late in the season. So then that leaves me with the New York Islanders and the Florida Panthers. Now, Florida gets in luckily. The reason of that is because I believe that there are still some potentials in Florida, but the fact of the matter is Sergei Bobrovsky, his first year being there, has been tough. It's been rough, and he's been trying to figure it out. However, you're facing off against a really tough defending team in the New York Islanders. I watched them since they moved on from John Tavares, and my God, New York is just they're tough. They're tough on defense, and they don't play nice. They're a very, very tough team, and they're the type of team that says, listen, if you're going to beat us, you need to learn how to score against us. If you can't even do that, then we're pushing you around. So New York has definitely been an interesting team, and even moving on from a guy like Robin Lehner, who him and Thomas Greiss clicked at the right time. Semyon Varlamov coming in from a free agency, I thought has been huge, but yet has kept them stable. Now, there have been a little bit of concerns, but New York, since last year's playoffs, I felt like they kind of figured some things out, but it'll be interesting. But I do see the New York Islanders beating Florida in 4 games, and they'll be moving on to the next round. And finally, the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, these two teams are very, very interesting because Toronto had hit a wall late in the season. The fact that Frederik Andersen was not as solid, lots of goals have been getting passed, and the offense kind of had some miscues. And listen, this is a make it or break it year for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Because if they cannot get further and further into the Stanley Cup playoffs, this whole thing is going to blow up. And they have spent all their top dollars on their best forwards, a little bit of their best defenders, and that only leaves goaltender Frederik Andersen just by himself. I think that's tough. While I look at the other side and listen, I don't brush off Columbus very easily because I thought Columbus was taking a huge step back because of everybody that they lost, including Panarin, Ryan Dzingel, a lot of these guys, and even Matt Duchene. But I do think what's interesting, when they called up a guy named Elvis Merzlikins, he's solid. He is a solid goaltender. But that's where ultimately it's a goaltender's match. Who's more solid, Merzlikins or Frederik Andersen? Toronto can't figure this thing out because the big thing is they got all pressures against them. And I think personally, I hate to burst Toronto Maple Leafs fans' bubbles, but I don't think Toronto's going to make it through. I think they're going to get upsetted by Columbus. Look, if Columbus was able to upset the Tampa Bay Lightning last year, this should be no problem with Toronto. And I understand with the injuries of Seth Jones, but as I said, this is a goaltender's match. It's going to be interesting. So the teams I have moving forward are Pittsburgh, the Rangers, the Islanders, and then Columbus. So now that leaves me with Pittsburgh against Boston. Now, I do think this is a matchup that I think Boston, it's going to be tough, but I think Boston's going to make it through. Now, it's the best of the best clashing against each other because you got Tuukka Rask also, who has been solid and has clicked at the right time for the Stanley Cup playoffs. And now the question is how the defense will shape, because we know that there have been some miscues on defense, but the offense has stayed solid. David Pastrnak having a hell of a year. Brad Marchand, he's had a couple of drops here and there, but he still maintains himself as a good offensive player. And then there's Patrice Bergeron, the middle of the pack. Boston's got some really good depth in them. And I know everybody kind of gives me crap because of the fact of, like, I've brushed them off. And yes, I did. But I do believe that I think that they are still a solid team. But it will come to a point of how far they'll make it in the playoffs. But I think Boston will beat Pittsburgh here. All right, so that leaves me now the Rangers and the Lightning. The Lightning, okay, they are on the spotlight. They are in the spotlight because after last year's embarrassing loss to the Columbus Blue Jackets, because they were the number one team in the NHL, had the best record, they won the President's Trophy, everything is on the line, and they took a little bit of a step back. But however, the offense looked aggressive. Since they got Blake Coleman from New Jersey, that offense has been fast, speedy, and aggressive. And it's brought out guys like Steven Stamkos and Nikita Kucherov. I think Tampa is going to stop New York in their place. And I think Tampa, with Andrei Vasilevsky in the playoffs, hoping to redeem himself after an embarrassing last year, I think Tampa's going to move forward with it. So I have the Bruins and the Lightning moving forward. Let's go to the Islanders and the Capitals. Now, this is going to be very, very interesting because of the fact of there have been questions surrounding Braden Holtby and how clutch he'll be now that we're in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But you also look at a team that is not easy to beat in the New York Islanders because they are very, very defensive and I think could very much turn the tables. Now, this is where Alex Ovechkin, in his best, has to lead this team to getting themselves further into the playoffs. This is a team that is hungry to get back into the final. After 2 years ago, winning the Stanley Cup final in 2018, they are hungry to get back into it. But John Carlson's had a hell of a defensive year. There's no doubt about that. But everybody has to click at the same time. So... But I think this is going to go all the way to the last game of the series. And I'll be honest, I think New York is going to win this series. What? I said it. I think New York is going to end up beating Washington at the last game of the series. The reason why that I say that is because this is not an easy team to face off against. They know it. And Washington, surrounding the questions of Braden Holtby, we don't know exactly how solid of a goaltender he may be. But again, there are lots of different opinions out there, but I do believe that I think the Islanders will beat the Capitals. And finally, Columbus against Philadelphia. Now, Philadelphia has been a surprise of a team because since Carter Hart got called up, Philadelphia's been winning more games. And they didn't get rid of some of their star players. You still have Sean Couturier, Claude Giroux, Jacob Voracek. Lots of these guys have been solid. So there has been a change, and I think maybe there's been an addition of juice for the Flyers. They've been very interesting up to this point. So I think the Flyers will end up beating the Columbus Blue Jackets here in this one. Now, listen, Columbus has had histories of beating good teams, but I think because of how red hot Philadelphia was before this pandemic hit, I mean, they were winning games. And nobody was really talking a whole lot about it, but they're solid. They are a solid team. So I think Philadelphia will beat Columbus and will move on to the next round of the playoffs. So that leaves me with the Bruins, the Lightning, the Islanders, and the Flyers. So let's start with the Bruins and the Lightning. This is two tough Eastern Conference teams clashing because Boston wants to get back into the final after losing last year. And then you've got Tampa, who is destined. They are not like, this is not a simple thing. They are destined to getting into the Stanley Cup final. They're destined for it because they got a chip on their shoulder. They got something to prove. And hopefully they will prove the doubters wrong. So I think this is going to be a 7-game series, and I think Tampa might actually get the last laugh against Boston. They've done this before, and 2 years ago in the playoffs, and they were a tough team. Tampa figured it out on all cylinders. So I think their offense is going to end up clicking, but at the same time, it's all going to be defense and it's all going to be strong goaltending from Andrei Vasilevsky. So I think it's going to be a 7-game series, and I think Tampa is going to make it through. And finally, the Islanders and the Flyers. So this is interesting because I think truly both these teams are solid, but I think if it had to come down to it, I think Philadelphia, they are a team that everybody slept on, and I think they're going to beat New York. I think they're going to end up beating the Islanders. Listen, the Islanders are a great team. Do not get me wrong, but there are still some missing pieces. There are still some missing pieces, and that is that grind. That's that every minute grind that the Islanders have to perform defensively and offensively. But I think Philadelphia has the upper hand because of the fact of Carter Hart is a very strong goaltender, and they got a little bit of more depth at the position. And their offenses with Claude Giroux, because Claude Giroux is a very different player in the playoffs. Very, very solid. So I think Philadelphia is going to make it through, and that's going to leave with the Lightning and the Flyers in the Eastern Conference Final. This is a tough one. But I do see this also going 7 games because both teams are solid offensively and defensively. Nobody's lost their players. 2 of them have actually gained some players during the trade deadline. But I think if I had to look at this very, very thoroughly, it's 7 games. As I've said, I think Tampa's destined to get in. I think Tampa finally shuts the doubters' doors in their mouths, and they make it into the Stanley Cup Final. They're going to represent the Eastern Conference in the Stanley Cup Final. I think the Tampa Bay Lightning right now, because they have such a big chip on their shoulder and everything that had happened from last year and even the year before, like they were close. This is the last year to do so because there are going to be a lot of changes. And hopefully, I truly think Tampa Bay is going to make it through. They're going to make it through, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun from here on out. But Tampa Bay against Vegas, I think this is a possibility of that Stanley Cup Final. That's the way I'm leaving it. I'm not choosing a winner yet. I'm leaving that for later. But that's how I see it. So, as I've said, I got the Penguins beating the Canadians, Rangers beating the Hurricanes, Islanders beating the Panthers, Columbus beating the Maple Leafs, and then moving on, you got Boston beating Pittsburgh, Tampa beating the Rangers, the Islanders beating the Capitals, and then you've got the Flyers beating the Blue Jackets. Then that leaves with Boston and Tampa, and I think Tampa's going to end up beating them, and then you have the Islanders against the Flyers. I think the Flyers will beat the Islanders, and then it'll be the Lightning and Flyers, and the Lightning are going to make it through. Gosh, that was a lot to cover up, but hey, it was fun. It was absolutely fun. I want to thank all of you guys for joining here in the Snake Sports Talk Show. I can't wait to see you guys next weekend. I will have a lot more to talk about. Hope all of you are staying safe and healthy. Jake the Snake Silva signing off. Have a great weekend and a great week ahead.